Hello everybody. So it will come to no surprise to anybody who follows MicroStrategy that Saylor bought this morning, about an hour ago as I recorded this video. He's announced he's bought 55,500 Bitcoin for 5.4 billion. Let me just say that I don't think he's done. I think he's gonna buy maybe one more time, maybe two more times this week because of the November 29 deadline for NASDAQ 100 inclusion and for all of the ETFs. He wants to be as high as possible in those NASDAQ following ETFs. And so the goal for that is for a market cap to be as high as you can by Friday, November 29. So that's why I don't think he's done buying. I actually thought he was going to buy a little more than that, but that's crazy to say because he bought 55,000 Bitcoin at $97,000 a Bitcoin. As he said, I'll be buying the top forever. It looks like he's roughly broken even. It's roughly where Bitcoin's trading at right now, in the 97-ish range. So he's roughly flat on that buy. The Bitcoin yield year to date is 59%, and so this is the key point of buying MicroStrategy as opposed to buying Bitcoin outright, is that by buying MicroStrategy, because of the volatility, you're able to acquire a yield because he dilutes more slowly than he accretes. You acquire more Bitcoin quicker than you dilute your shareholders, because you dilute your shareholders with a capped upside and you dilute your shareholders later down the road. Anyways, let me move on. The market is liking this. The stock is at roughly $439, $440. Again, the market went back up as soon as he announced that he had bought. This was a highly expected bought. Why do we know? How can you predict these buys? You probably know this, but you can predict these buys whenever he tweets the SaylorTracker.com and whenever he says this needs more green dots. That means something's brewing in the background. That means he's buying. Kudos to Twitter. Twitter got onto the news really 6-7 minutes after it was announced. As I record this video, still no mention on this on CNBC. I don't know why I keep looking at CNBC. Still no mention of this on CNBC. It's funny because whenever a short seller last Thursday attacked MicroStrategy, it was all over CNBC. This 42 minutes in, I still see no mention whatsoever of this. All of the crypto news outlets have picked up on this, not traditional finance. So I wouldn't be surprised if it takes a few hours, if not the whole day, to really get to this news. And this is a major news, of course, for MicroStrategy. Let me move on. What's going on? They're way ahead of schedule. Saylor is way ahead of schedule. They had announced 10 billion of capital raised in 2025. Well, guess what? We're past that already. 14 billion in 2026, 18 billion in 2027. We're way past that. That was the 21-21 plan. 42, as he called it, poetically, the answer to everything, right, in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Anyways, Michael Saylor is a very well-read person. This morning's announcement, again, 5.4 billion. So what does that mean, 5.4 billion? Well, that means he probably tapped the ATM, and again, we knew this was going to happen. He tapped the ATM. That means he issued equity, and that's probably why the stock was down on Thursday quite a bit, is he was probably tapping the ATM and issuing the equity. How do we know that? Because his convertible bond, you see, he only raised 3 billion and he bought 5.2. So there's 2.4 billion extra that had to likely come from the ATM for 2 days buy, for this buy. So it's likely 60% convertible bond, 40% at the market issued equity, which is probably why the stock has been down on Thursday, and this is why I wouldn't be surprised if the stock is down again some of the next few days this week, although it's a short week. Don't forget we have Thanksgiving and we have a reduced trading day on Wednesday. Overbuys since 21-21, right? Over the past 2 weeks, this buy right here is the third buy over the past 2 weeks. We had a buy of 51,000 Bitcoin and we had a buy of 27,000 Bitcoin. So he's really spending those billions. For the past 2 weeks, since 21-21 plan was announced at the conference call, the latest earnings report, since they announced 21-21, Today, so yesterday announced today, they did 5.4 billion, bought 55,000 Bitcoin for 97,000 a Bitcoin. November 18, they did 4.6 billion, bought 51,000 Bitcoin for $88,000 a Bitcoin. And November 11, they bought 27,000 Bitcoin for 74,000 a Bitcoin at $2 billion. So you can see he's in the green already for 2 purchases. There's just today's purchases where he may have to wait a few days to be in the green. He's not in the green yet. But as he said, he'll be buying the top forever because, as Max Kaiser said, Bitcoin has no top because fiat has no bottom. And as long as fiat has no bottom, Bitcoin will have no top. Bitcoin can only have a top if it is divided by something that is as scarce as Bitcoin, by something that has a fixed supply. And it's nowhere near to be the case for fiat. And so he spent $12 billion in 2 weeks. He's way ahead of schedule. He started tapping into the money that was earmarked for 2026. Right, so the 10 billion that were scheduled for 25 it's already out of a window. He's already digging into 2026. I mean, how much more is he going to raise, right? How much more ahead is he going to raise? And that's why he tweeted this a few days ago. He tweeted, "We're going to need a bigger rocket." Well, I agree because you're almost halfway. I mean, you're getting close to being out of fuel, Michael Saylor. So yeah, you might actually need a bigger rocket as long as these convertible debts, these convertible bonds are oversubscribed. Let me move on to my spreadsheet. I tried to find the time this weekend to work on a spreadsheet. I worked on a primitive spreadsheet. I feel bad showing you something so primitive, but I'm running out of time. I have so little time. This is very exciting. I want to spend more time for the spreadsheet. Anyways, this is updated with the MicroStrategy numbers. Also, I updated with a Saylor number. Saylor Scientific did a small buy too today. Yesterday, that is. So MicroStrategy right now, so 386,700 Bitcoin. The Bitcoin NAV total is $37 billion. They're trading, the market cap of MicroStrategy is 44% of that market cap is made of Bitcoin. And so one way to think about it is 44% of that market cap is made of Bitcoin. 55.8% is what is the premium that you pay for the astute management, for the ability to borrow money at 0%, for the ability to borrow money $3 billion at 0%, right? Individuals can't do that. And so you pay the 55% premium for the astute management. Said in another way, it's like saying, oh, it trades at 2.2 times Bitcoin. And typically you could put it like that if you say, oh, I'm overpaying. I'm overpaying by, close to 60%. I'm overpaying. That's something that someone would say if you don't value management, if you don't value the Bitcoin yield, or if you don't even, maybe you value it, but maybe you don't think there's possibility that he will keep raising the yield. You don't think that will happen. Maybe you'll think for some reason those convertible debts, they're not going to be as popular in the future. A lot of institutions, hedge fund, family offices, universities, insurance companies, for some reason, they will stop buying those convertible bonds. Maybe you believe that. If you think that, of course, overpaying is not a good idea. But if you think that's going to keep going, then that premium to me is not looking that high. No financial advice, of course. I want to point out he's easing into the premium. Every time there's a new buy, the price to Bitcoin NAV goes down. And so that is also another question. This is my price targets here. It's a price target as of today. It's a what if price target, right? It's not a timeline price target. It's a what if. What if the price of MicroStrategy? What if MicroStrategy was trading at 5 times NAV? Well, if that were to happen right now, the price would be $931. What if MicroStrategy were to trade at 7 times NAV? Well, it would be $1,300. Notice how I'm fair with these price ratios, price to NAV ratios. I'm fair. I'm not using NVIDIA at 60 NAV, right? I'm using much closer to a bank's NAV. Granted, a bank's NAV right now is about that. It's about a 2 to a 2.25, but it's on book value that is a melting ice cube. A bank's net asset value, a bank's book's value is a melting ice cube. For MicroStrategy, the book value is a growing asset, an asset whose value in fiat terms is growing. And so should it be 5? Should it be 7? If you think the price to NAV should be higher, then these would be the price targets. Again, no financial advice. I can't emphasize that big enough. This is just entertainment. This channel is only entertainment. Moving on to MicroStrategy for the yield. So what about the yield? What if you were to value the yield? So Bitcoin yield was 59% this year. I can only do the trailing yield. I can't do a forward yield because I have no idea what the yield is going to be in the future. This is very unpredictable. But if you just do a backwards calculation of a yield, a trailing yield, that means that the trailing yield will be 22 billion right now. And so the market cap over the Bitcoin yield right now is a 3.8. They are trading 3.8 times more expensively than what they have yielded for their shareholders in the form of a Bitcoin yield, and in dollars that would be 22 billion. So they're trading at 2.8 times 22 billion. And this is what Saylor says. This is how Saylor thinks it should be calculated. A ratio of the Bitcoin yield. What if you were to assume an old school, traditional, old world 15 times earnings? Kind of if you talk to somebody who's been into finance for 40 years, they'll tell you, oh, a stock should be valued at 15 times earnings. And if it's more than 15, it's overvalued. If it's less than 15, it's undervalued. That's kind of like your traditional finance person will say a 15. Well, if it were to trade at 15 times the Bitcoin yield in cash, then what you would get is today is a price of $1,600 for MicroStrategy. If it were to trade at 30 times, so not quite tech, but kind of halfway between old world company and a tech company, you'd be at 3,300 if it were to trade at these yields. Again, that's a big what if. This is no advice. This is no financial advice. This is just the what if, and this is what Saylor discusses. He discusses that on the channels. On CNBC talked about that, for example. So I don't know how this company should be valued. Very few people know how this company should be valued, and it seems like the shorts, they say, oh, it should be valued at one-time NAV. Well, the one thing that I'm convinced is that it shouldn't be valued at one-time NAV because it's doing something more. It's offering a Bitcoin yield to the people. When I was buying this company, it had nowhere near $35 billion in Bitcoin. When I was buying this company, it was, $8 billion total was the value of the company, even less for some of my buys. So again, they're growing the underlying Bitcoin. Every time they grow the underlying Bitcoin, the stock on a price to Bitcoin NAV value gets cheaper. And so we need to reassess. I think it's going to take many months, if not years, for the market to figure out how to value MicroStrategy. And I think a lot of people are going to keep hating on MicroStrategy. This is a company that seems to be heavily disliked, especially by the more traditional market participants. It's all about generating the yield. So this is a yield story. This is a Bitcoin yield story. You've seen my early videos probably where I tell you about how Saylor could generate yield on the Bitcoin after the era of convertible bonds. Once he can't leverage the premium to Bitcoin in the common stock to issue new shares. Once he can't leverage the convertible bonds, there will be, in my view, possibilities to earn yield on the Bitcoin itself via doing Bitcoin loans, via providing liquidity for Bitcoin transactions, via listing the Bitcoin into a wrapped Bitcoin on a layer 2, the layer 2 to Bitcoin, right, which would be the Lightning Network, but also on another layer 1, right? You can list Bitcoin on Ethereum. Right, it's called WBTC. You can list Bitcoin on Solana. You can do that, and people can trade your Bitcoin. You can also mint stable coins and use the Bitcoin as a backing for stable coins. There's so many things you can do to the Bitcoin, but that's a 2030 and beyond opportunity. In my view, we still live in the era of opportunity related to arbitraging traditional finance and digital finance. And that's what he's taking advantage of, taking advantage of spikes in the MicroStrategy premium. Whenever MicroStrategy stock spikes, you issue common stock. When you issue common stock, you put it straight into Bitcoin. And so that extra volatility to the upside, that rise in the stock, you cap it a little bit by issuing new stock, and you turn that into Bitcoin. And so you issue a yield to whoever bought your stock at a lower price, which over the long run, of course, stocks have a poor volatility. So you generate a yield like that for the long-term common holder. And Saylor has said that all he does is in the interest of the long-term common stock holder. He said he's working for a common stock holder, and this is normal, of course. This is how stocks work. he's the chair, right? But the executive chairman or the CEO of MicroStrategy, right, Fong Li, they work for a common shareholder. So that's one way they take advantage of it. Another one is, of course, the convertible bonds. So how do they do it? You raise money today with a convertible bond that you issue today. You buy Bitcoin today with the money from that convertible bond, and we know that he's really quick to convert the money received from the bond to Bitcoin is a really quick trip. And then you dilute tomorrow. And in the case of the latest bond that we discussed today, the dilution will be 2029. You dilute tomorrow. And you dilute tomorrow, furthermore, you dilute tomorrow at a capped upside. The last bond that they issued, that was a 55% conversion premium. And to give you an idea, 55% conversion premium. If you're a bondholder, that's very attractive over a 5-year period. But Saylor thinks Bitcoin is going to do between 30 and 50% each year for the next 5 years. So to him, it's like sharing 25% of a return of a transaction and keeping 75% of a return of a transaction for the common shareholder. And that's a fair thing to do, of course, because while there's capped upside to the bondholder, there is a capped upside, there's also a limited downside because it's a bond. And the bond have a principal value that is, quote unquote, somewhat guaranteed, i.e. aside from bankruptcy. And that's why bondholders can force sometimes a company into bankruptcy if they don't get paid. But you have that floor in the principal value when the debt matures. When the debt matures, there's two options. A, you convert into shares, and so hopefully they will likely convert earlier than 2029 if everything goes to plan. But if not, you can just ask for the cash back. And there's, of course, when you buy a bond and when you buy MicroStrategy, anybody buying MicroStrategy or anybody buying a bond, there's a binary risk of Bitcoin failing. And of course, if Bitcoin fails, the company will fail. But this is a risk that is understood, I hope, and I'm saying this out loud, this is a risk that should be understood by any buyer of MicroStrategy and any buyer of the bonds of MicroStrategy. And Saylor really hammers this point home. He keeps saying, the buyers of MicroStrategy, whether you're buying a bond or whether you're buying the stock, you have to believe in Bitcoin. You have to believe in Bitcoin first to buy this. You have to, because if you believe Bitcoin is going to fail, of course, MicroStrategy is going to look like heresy to you. It's going to look like insanity to you. If you think Bitcoin is going to fail, you're never going to understand MicroStrategy. So it's a prerequisite. Thinking Bitcoin is going to succeed is the base prerequisite to even consider starting to look at MicroStrategy. And this is why this stock is so misunderstood, in my view, so misunderstood. So my assumption for the longest time, I've been in Bitcoin for a while, my assumption for the longest time is that, Bitcoin's going to succeed. That's my assumption. And if Bitcoin's going to succeed, then the MicroStrategy Blackhole model that I've kind of published in a prior video, it's going to keep happening, which is you're going to have that new money issuance, right? And we print it digitally. So as a central bank, we have the ability to create money digitally. Granted, when he does it for the treasury, commercial banks are a much bigger part of the problem than the Fed. I can't believe I'm saying something good about the Fed right now. But yes, commercial bank is where most of the money printing comes. But commercial banks, do it electronically too. Anyways, the point is the money supply, the money pie just keeps growing and growing and growing. And while some of that growth in money supply goes towards inflation, much of that growth in money supply goes towards hard asset, and we go towards real estate, equities, and bonds. As far as we're concerned, we put real estate aside, and we notice that the growth supply, and some of it goes straight to Bitcoin, by the way, but most of it's going to go to equities and bonds. And of course, Saylor is tapping both. Growth in the money supply goes to equities. Growth in the money supplies goes to bond. Saylor issues equity in the form of common stock, and so he's capturing some of these new equities, and that's why getting listed on the NASDAQ 100 is such a huge deal, because he will be capturing monthly that perpetual bid from the equities. And then he also captures money from the bond market, because the bond market buys bonds, and MicroStrategy is a top issuer of convertible bond for now. But he's not against doing traditional bonds too. So anyways, that's the black hole theory. Money supply grows, it sticks to asset, and MicroStrategy has put itself into two asset classes, the equities asset class and the bonds asset class. And this is a change compared to the way Bitcoin stocks used to do it before, where Bitcoin stocks before used to only offer their exposure, their asset. They used to only offer it in the equities section and not necessarily in the bonds section. And in my model, you can look this model in my video. I talk about many other links between MicroStrategy and the financial system. There's many other things that could happen. That's in this video. I called it MicroStrategy a black hole, where I explain it. And of course, Bitcoin-backed bonds, which is also a video where I try to address some of the points. It's like, so why? So you keep raising convertible debt? Well, it's you're diluting. It's a waste of money. It's a scam. Well, of course, no financial advice, but there's dilution. There's dilution for investing in acquisition and overpaying for an acquisition, which is what happens so often in companies. Companies will issue convertible debt, or they will issue bonds or common stock sometimes to do an acquisition. And it takes 3 years for you to see whether the acquisition was a good idea or not, right? Look up AT&T's acquisition of Time Warner and what happened to HBO after AT&T touched it, right? So many acquisitions fail. MicroStrategy and acquisitions, if they fail, you're going to know if they fail 3 years down the road. MicroStrategy is very different. Is you get the money from the bond and you put it straight into Bitcoin, and thereby you're creating a Bitcoin-backed bond. And of course, if you think Bitcoin is a Ponzi, if you think Bitcoin is a scam, if you think Bitcoin is going to zero, you're going to assess that MicroStrategy is also going to zero, right? But I mean, as a Bitcoiner, as someone who's been following Bitcoin for the longest time, I can tell you this feeling that Bitcoin is a Ponzi. That feeling is gonna keep going probably for another 10 years. I don't know how long this is gonna go, and the financial system is entirely warming up to the idea of Bitcoin and the newness of Bitcoin. So anyways, this is obviously not financial advice, not investment advice, but just entertainment. And so I'm hoping you were entertained. I am very, very bullish from my position in MicroStrategy, but this is absolutely not investment advice or financial advice. This is just me. I'm literally just entertaining you, telling you what I'm doing, and maybe you think I'm gonna fail on this one, and that's fine. That's totally fine. As Saylor says, we welcome the shorts. It's perfectly fine. Please please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.